Knights, we shall ride to Camelford. So today we're in Camelford. This is the River Camel. We're going to go for a walk along the River Camel. So this is Camelford, and it's probably no coincidence that it sounds a bit like Camelot, because this area is steeped in Arthurian myth and legend. But there's the clock tower with a camel on top. Okay, this is where we join the river. So away from the noise of the traffic and down to the River Camel, and we're walking down as far as Fenteroon Bridge, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and then back along the meadows. So here we go, the River Camel. So we're here as a little bit of an antidote to what we did yesterday. Yesterday was the day we walked the coast path from the Shambles round to Crackington Haven in the blazing hot sun. And I had sun cream on and everything, but still managed to get a little bit toasted by the sunshine. So we thought today we'd have a nice shady walk by some water. Quite often see this in a little patch of sunlight here. There are flies and they're racing back and forth, and then they just turn around and come back again. And just over there is a little sparrow. Zipping through. Actually, that's not a sparrow. Little bird of some sort, unidentified, not sure what that is, but just flying across and catching flies on the wing. It's a damselfly. Several damselflies. And speckled wood butterflies. Lots of flying insects. It's always good to see, even if they happen to be the kind that might bite. And there is an aroma here. This is Ramson's wild garlic. It's unfortunately past its best for foraging now, so I won't be picking any of this, but it's got the seeds here. I mean, we could forage some of these very immature seed pods. In fact, we might. I think I will forage some of these stalks. They are a perfect tender stage for picking, and use them in a recipe back at home. So yeah, I'm just going to pick some of these immature seed heads from the Ramsons, because at the moment the hard seeds inside them haven't fully formed, and so at the moment these are just little pods of delicious garlic. So even though the leaves and the buds that we foraged earlier in the year nearer to home are over now, there's still some flavour to be had from these things. So we'll get a few of these, and well, when I say we'll take them home to cook them, we're obviously not foraging from home here, so Jenny's way ahead of me. Eva's having a little paddle down there. You keeping your feet cool? Good girl. It wouldn't be an atomic shrimp video near the waterside if we didn't point out hemlock water dropwort. Won't be foraging that one. One of the most deadly poisonous plants we've got in this land. I was hoping for a little bit more shade than this, but maybe we'll cross back over and get in the shade in a minute. Eva found the mud. Don't jump down there. It's too big for you. No, come on. You're not a water dog. A very pale example there of red campion. The colour of this plant, the flowers of this plant, is incredibly variable. And the camera can't be showing you the full scope of it because it's one of those pinks that just doesn't photograph well or record well. But these are a very pale pink. I would say that's pale marshmallow pink. But we do sometimes see these and they are piercingly bright pink. I mean, there's a fairly bright one. That is kind of shocking pink almost. Bumblebee there enjoying the flowers. Ribwort plantain, a very tall specimen of ribwort plantain. Look at that. You know, for it being a not necessarily pretty flower, you have to get close and look at the structure, and it's actually rather lovely. The other reason for picking a riverside walk today was that if you walk alongside a river, you're fairly assured that it's not going to be lots and lots of steep up and down hills. Beautifully clear, clean water. And we've seen fish, lots of different fish actually, some which I think must have been juvenile trout, but we've seen minnows as well, probably sticklebacks. Hard to tell without taking them out of the water. The river's obviously been channeled here, so there's remains of an old wall. So the river has been channeled. Possible, I suppose, that there was a mill on this site. See, there's a specimen of red campion that is brilliantly shocking pink. I know that the camera won't be showing you that in its proper pinkness, but also notice how the petals are quite long on this one and deeply cut. The flowers are really variable on this. I mean, look how deeply cut they are on that one. And it's just, I keep on looking at this plant and marveling at how variable those flowers are. There's just a lot of, sometimes, you know, sometimes the petals are broad, sometimes they're narrow, sometimes they're bright dark pink, and other times they are pale, almost white, and sometimes of course they are completely white. Sometimes there is a mutation that occurs. I mean, the plant doesn't produce the pigments at all, and you get a pure white flower, which is actually quite difficult to tell apart from bladder campion, which is a white flower all the time. So here's another example of red campion, and this one's just a kind of mid-pink, but look at the petals. They are almost completely divided into two lobes. It's a 5-petaled flower with cut petals, which makes it sometimes look like it's got 10 petals. But there we go. Just a very variable plant, and I love it for that. So just down here again, I can smell wild garlic, and you smell it before you see it sometimes. I imagine it's probably somewhere in amongst this low-lying bit here, which looks like it might have been an oxbow. It's an old meander that's filled in. The walk is punctuated by these really, really old kissing gates. This is called a kissing gate. It's a gate that doesn't need a lock on it because cattle can't get through here. A person walks into that bit, moves the gate, walks out of it. So it's called a kissing gate. I don't think it's because you're meant to kiss here. I think it's because the gate itself only kisses the posts. Anyway, might not be right. This is really old. How do we know that? Because it's wrought iron. It's got stone footings. It's not concrete footings, it's set into stones. And it's held in place by melting lead into the holes. So they put the metal posts into the stone and then poured molten lead around the foot of the post to set it in place. So I would say probably at the latest that is early 20th century. It may be mid-Victorian or older. Go on, you know what to do. Rescuing stones. Okay. So at this point in the river, the watercourse meanders over there. You can see it bends away from us and then comes back. And what will happen is the river will erode away at that opposite bank because the water's flowing against it. And it'll cut itself further and further over that way, and the sediments on this little beach here will be deposited because the water's moving slower here. So the meander will move over that way, but eventually it will become so far away from the main course of the river, it'll start to go uphill, and so it will just cut itself off. And a flood will happen, and the river will just cut across the loop and leave an isolated, well, if it's big enough, an oxbow lake, but probably just a little shelf. And that's already happened once here, because we can see down here there's an old meander here where it came this way. So there's a curved bank here. So the river probably used to come down here, maybe over there, and then in here and across. But this has cut itself off and the river's meandered off in the opposite direction now. You can see the flies racing again in that patch of sunlight over there. I'm just going to go and take a look at that because it is quite a phenomenal spectacle. So I don't know what kind of flies those are, but I've seen this very often. When there's a little patch of sunlight, they go racing through it, and there's almost like a circuit, like a racetrack, and the flies are zipping up and down. It seems to me like they'd be expending a lot of energy to do that. So whatever they're doing must have some quite important purpose, probably something to do with mating or finding food. So the village we walked from, Camelford, is not named Camelford by accident. This is the River Camel, and a ford is a place where you can cross a river. And river crossings tend to be the places where villages and towns grow up, because there's a road or a path or a track that crosses the river. And so in a place where you've got a road and water, it's a place where humans might choose to settle. So Camelford is Camel Ford, the ford across the River Camel. And river crossings are really quite important in history. And there's another one we're coming up to now, which is quite an ancient bridge. So this is called Fentaroon Bridge, and if I just jump over onto this tiny island here, we can get a better look. So this is known as a clapper bridge. No arches, no bricks, just great big slabs of granite on stone piers built down onto the riverbed. So there we go, Fentaroon Bridge, this clapper bridge. I think it's the age of this bridge is not known exactly, but it's believed to be, I think, 17th, 18th century. It's interesting, there is a little bit of stonework here as well on this channel that runs off up there. Anyway, there we go, Fentaroon Bridge. So we've left the river now and we just head uphill here, and somewhere up here there's a footpath off to the right. Is this it? Don't think so. Lots and lots more wild garlic here, all the way along this bank. So here's a plant we don't often stop and admire. This is called pignut or earth nut. It's in the carrot family. You can recognise it because obviously it has these umbels of white flowers, like a lot of carrot family plants do, but it also has this very, very finely cut, delicate foliage. Underneath each one of these stalks is a tuber, a starchy root, perhaps about the size of a walnut, and tastes a bit like carrot, but a bit more nutty, and so it's called earth nut or pignut. You can't pull them up. If you pull them up, the stalk will just detach from the root. And I don't own the land here, so it's illegal for me to dig these up. But one day I will succeed in getting these to grow in my garden. So the return path is uphill a little bit from the river, across the meadows. Here's a little shady spot where, if we wanted to, we could probably still pick some of these wild garlic Probably just about fresh enough if we have a rummage around, pick some young-ish, smallish leaves, just because it's a bit shadier, maybe a bit cooler here, perhaps a bit more damp. The plant is a little bit further behind all of its peers elsewhere. So anyway, but we've got the seeds. So back across this lovely hay meadow. So it's really common for public footpaths in the UK to traverse farmland like this. So we're on a field margin here. You will sometimes find footpaths that go directly across the crop, and they are legal footpaths, and they've always been that way. I use a combination of map sources to tell me which of my footpaths I can walk on. There is a footpath app that is very good and very well provisioned for all of the marked paths, but there are plenty of other map sources, and these footpaths have existed for centuries. There was, a few years back I think, a proposal that any footpaths that weren't recorded on a map were going to be closed off and regarded as private. I don't think it actually came about in the end, because the task of documenting all of those footpaths is huge. So we're looking at the footpath map as recorded, but this is not all of the footpaths. There are plenty more small ones that have been around for centuries, and people still walk them, still use them, but nobody's ever thought to put it on a map. So in a moment our countryside footpath will rejoin the high street of Camelford, and that's pretty much the end of this segment of the walk. Upstream from the town there's another little circular walk which we're just going to have a look at now. But this river is absolutely teeming with small fish, and I think that structure we saw from the bridge in the intro of this video is a fish ladder. There's a little weir there, and there was a fish ladder, just a recap of what that looked like. But yeah, as I was standing here just now, I saw a trout rise in this stream down here. Of course, we're not going to see it when the camera's rolling. It doesn't look like we can go any further along the riverbank, but I feel like I would be missing out on the experience if I didn't walk across these stepping stones. Oh, quite a big step actually. I think there might be a way back without doing that. This is interesting. This is quite old. And again, makes me wonder if there was a mill here or something. But I think we can get back this way. Yeah, definitely some kind of structures here. So that was our little wander along the River Camel. And we picked some wild garlic. And on the way home I think I will probably pick some Babington's leeks as well, because I've seen them growing on our route home. So let's get our wild garlic back to Shrimp HQ and see what we can do with it. So here in the little kitchen of our holiday cottage, which by the way looks like this, it's pretty basic. We've got the Ramson's seed pods that I picked by the River Camel, and then on the way home we stopped off near to Crackington Haven, where we went yesterday, and picked some of these Babington leek scapes which we saw on our walk yesterday. So I've got two different kind of garlicky things here. I'm going to make some garlic rice to go with some pork and beans and tomatoes. So a cup of rice, cup and a half of water, lid on, and then we'll cook that until all the water's absorbed. So some locally produced Cornish pork, belly pork slices, really quite fatty actually, so we'll have to just render these to make them nice and crispy, get all that fat out of them. The fat won't go to waste. You can tell it's local pork because it says local pork for local people. Anyway, we're going to dice that up. I can see there's some little bones in there, we'll also take those out. I've also got some vegetables, and we're going to improvise with things like some marmalade from the local village shop, some chutney that I bought in Devon on the way down here, onion and pineapple, really good, and I've got a tin of tomatoes and a tin of butter beans, and I've got my little travelling spice kit, which has had a bit of an upgrade. So in addition to salt, pepper, paprika, herbs, curry powder and garlic, we've got some little vials of saffron, cinnamon, nutmeg, tarragon, ginger and mustard. So about a couple of teaspoons of each of those in those pots, but only a little pinch in these. So these two bits of bone, there's a big old chunk of bone there and some gristly bits. I'd love to have been able to put those in my stock box and use them for making stock later on, but I can't, we're not at home. I mean, I'm going to chuck those in the pan with the rice. Barely time for them to actually infuse any flavour into that water with that rice cooking, but we might as well take what we can get. If we were going to roast this belly pork, I'd have left the rind on because there's a whole lot of flavour and texture in there, but we're not going to be cooking it for that long, so I'm going to have to trim that off. I'd rather be working with a bigger knife than this, but this is what we got. This pork's just going to be sliced up into strips like that. So all of this pork is just going to go into this big pan, and I'm going to fry that until it's all crispy and golden. So while that's taking place over there, I've got my vegetables prepared. Let's have a look at these garlic things we've got. So these are the Ramson's buds, or Ramson's pods. I'm just going to pull them off the stalks, and I think we'll find that they just crush really easily. There's no hard seed inside of these, that's really good. So I'm going to pull all of these off and crush them. And crushing them will release some of their pungent garlic flavour. Just going to give that pork a stir. So that crispy pork is going to come out into a different pan. We got a good amount of fat in there, so I'm going to reserve some of that with the pork, and the rest is now going to be used to fry my garlic. So we've got the equivalent of maybe 2 cloves of garlic there in volume. I have no idea in terms of flavour how much that is, but we'll find out. I'm going to crush it just with the base of this glass. And that's going to go into that pork fat. Meanwhile, these Babington's leek scapes. Now I had a look at these and I was thinking about picking the whole stalk, but the stalks are really woody at this point. But these buds are full of the little bulbils and immature flowers, which are later going to develop. And it's just got a wonderfully sweet onion aroma. So I'm going to cut these into chunks. They look quite a lot like artichoke hearts, and those are going to need a little fry as well. So, you know, doing wild garlic rice, no point doing things by halves, is there? That is also now going to go into that hot fat, and I'm going to bring the heat back up and just give it a little fry. So really just the most gentle little sizzle in that pork fat, just to soften this and cook it through. Okay, I reckon that's all it needs. The rice with its cooked bits of pork bone in there. Those have done as much as they can now, so those are going to come out. But then that cooked garlic and leek just going to get stirred through the rice. And I can put that back out the way and just let that infuse. So in this pan, which has still got a little bit of fat from the pork, and it will have some flavour of garlic in there, now these vegetables are going to go in. Pretty much everything's going to happen over here now, so I've just moved the rice out of the way. And the vegetables cooking in now, and the pork in this pan, which I'm going to get back up to heat. And now we can start thinking about some of the seasonings that are going to go in this lot. So into the vegetables, some, not that much, some dried mixed herbs, a little pinch of salt, a little pinch of pepper. And then once this pork starts to sizzle again, we're going to have in there marmalade, which, as I say, bought from the village shop. This was from Higher Crackington stores, made by the lady that works in the shop. So, a nice couple of generous spoonfuls of marmalade in there. 1 spoonful of this Devon chutney. My little pinch of ginger. Sounds like it needs a stir. And we're going to have just a little pinch of curry in there as well. I reckon that's probably as much as that needs, so I'm going to turn the heat off and have a taste. Nice. Kind of like sweet and sour. Okay, vegetables are all but done. So now a bit of paprika in here. And watch, you're going to see me open a pull-tab can. Well, we can. Can of chopped tomatoes. And also a tin of butter beans, which I'll just drain. So I'm going to simmer that for 10 minutes or so, just until that's reduced down a little bit. And then we're ready to serve. Okay, a little taste for seasoning, I think. Just needs another little pinch of salt. Okay, I think we're ready to serve. All right, so here it all is. So, the garlic rice, or garlic and leek rice, I suppose. The bean and vegetable stew, and sticky marmalade pork. Now, I do need to taste a bit of this rice before we dig in, so I'll do that straight out of the pan. So, make sure I get a bit with some Babington's leek on it. It's really, really good. Just tastes of fresh wild garlic, but not overpowering. So that's dinner. We're now going to go and sit outside in the shade and enjoy that. So thanks for joining us on this walk on the banks of the beautiful River Camel. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.